What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 653. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me this time, all the way from Cornwall in the UK, in place for Luis, who couldn't be here this week. He had a crazy week lined up. It is Sierkovitz. Welcome back to the show, Sierko. It's nice to see you.
Oh, it's always nice to see you too. Also nice not to see Luis for once.
Wow, you're coming out strong. The good news is he doesn't listen to the show ever, so we can say whatever we want. Yeah, so no problem. Always great to have you on the show, Sierko. Of course, you work closely with 17Lands.com, who gather data about Limited and help us expand our strategic horizons. We're going to be doing a bunch of that on the show this week. We're going to be talking with Sierko about a bunch of things, including his take on new Capenna draft, his take on alchemy in the context of Limited. We're also going to be talking about signals, and not just the normal stuff, but signals and the data behind them, as Sierko has gone deep on that. And we're going to see what kind of takeaways we can get when we are aided by data. Before we get into that, let's talk about our sponsors. First up, channelfireball.com. Make sure you check them out for all things Magic related. If you need booster packs, singles, supplies, any of that kind of stuff, you're going to find it over at Channel Fireball. Specifically with singles, a while back now, they switched over to a marketplace, which means that stores can sell their singles through the CFB marketplace. So when you search for a single, it'll show you all the stores that have that card, the price, the shipping, the condition, and you can kind of figure out where you want to fall to get the card the quickest or the correct condition that you'd like, and you can pick the one that gets it to you the cheapest as well. That's all at the marketplace. And of course, there's CFB Pro. If you're looking to get better at Magic, that's a great place to aid in your learning, right? If you need to get caught up on a deck, a sideboard guide, a strategic guide for a constructed deck, or a concept in Limited, you're going to find great content from some of the best players in the world at CFB Pro. And there's, of course, the free side, and then there's the pro side, which is the kind of subscription model. It's very affordable. You can check out how it works over at Channel Fireball. If you do end up picking up anything at CFB, if you use the affiliate code LR at checkout, we do appreciate it, and thank you for that. Show's also brought to you by FTX. That's the best place to manage your digital assets. If you're inside the United States, it's ftx.us. If you're outside, it's ftx.com. This is a safe, regulated place to do so. It is a form of investment, so you always want to make sure that you educate yourself properly, consult an investment professional before making any type of investment. But when you're ready to dive into the world of blockchain-based, currencies and that type of thing, FTX is where you want to go. Make sure you check them out for all of your digital currency needs. Also, of course, the show is brought to you by you via the Patreon. It's patreon.com/limited resources. If you'd like to join, you get access to a bunch of stuff, including at no matter what level you're at, you get a thank you card and a sticker in the mail. You also get access to the Patreon feed, which will give you if we put up a question of the week thread or a Q&A episode, which we're going to be doing soon, you can put in your questions there. You can ask Luis and I anything in those, about food or life stuff, magic, whatever it is that you think you want to know. You get access to that. You also get access to the live viewing of the show, which is kind of cool. We put up a link and you can watch us record the show live. You can watch us doing our pre-show chat and then a little bit of chat afterwards as well. And by the way, even if you can't be there exactly when we're recording to watch it live, that link stays and you can watch it, a few hours later, no problem. And you can still see all that stuff. Obviously, you wouldn't be able to interact with us via the chat in that case, but still you get access to that as well. So a bunch of cool stuff over on the Patreon. It's patreon.com/limited resources. Sierko, we got a Patreon question of the week. And this is one that Luis and I actually already answered, but I saw it and I thought, I want to know what Sierkovitz thinks. This one comes from Justin. He says, if you could add one feature to MTG Arena or make one change to it, what would it be?
For me personally, I would add pod drafting with your friends, because I would really love, to catch up with some of my old mates back from Poland, or on a lazy day play with a couple of people that moved away from where I live currently. and just organize a draft, pay for it, and then we can play in the pod, organize it ourselves, and have fun by personal challenges. But to do that, we can, of course, draft outside of the server, and there are ways to do that. But it would be nice if Arena actually provided me with that kind of possibility.
Oh, that would be really fun. Especially if
the gathering can be also online. I don't know if they figured that one out, but online gatherings have been quite common. I mean, we played the whole F&M circuit during the COVID with our own format and organized via other means, but we played it on Arena and we just chatted on Skype while we did it, and it was great.
Yeah, there is room for that, right? Definitely love the idea of being able to really have like a more deeply, fully fleshed out version like you're describing here, where, you can pick the format. You could pick 6 players and do a team draft where you could say, okay, I want these players in these seats, or, here's the 2 teams, randomize the seats, whatever. You could do an 8-player draft, in a more traditional way. I'd love it if you could just have a bunch of drop downs to pick what you wanted. You could do a cube draft against your friends, that type of thing. I mean, I would pay a premium for that for sure. Just like to have
even
that
if
option.
It was a Phantom event or something. I mean, that would be fun.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Phantom would be totally fine. Just for the experience of it, because that is a thing that is probably the hardest part about drafting in real life. Once you get the 6 or 8 players together, then it goes fine, right? People slot right in and everything's cruising. But I mean, how many times have you had it where, you invited, 7 of your friends over and one of them said, hey, I can't make it. And you're like, oh man, now we've got, an odd number of people and we're scrambling around trying to find that last person, or tell somebody else, hey, if you didn't really want to come, we could just do it with 6. These are the logistics of booster draft that does make it difficult. And boy, being able to do that on Arena would be great. I like your idea. I hope that they do that someday. It feels low priority, right? I mean, they still have sort of basic functionality that they haven't put into effect yet. So I would not hold my breath on it, I suppose.
I mean, I live in a place that has not a big resource of Magic players, because our town has 20,000 people. So how many Magic players would you expect? It's still a university, so you will find some students and whatnot. But last time I had a box of double feature and we played the draft. We managed to find 6 people. 8 was a bit of a stretch. And one of them bailed out last moment because they got poorly. So we had to literally call a cab for someone to bring them from a neighboring town.
Wow.
And they came to play with us, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to play. And there was already 5 people sitting there and like,
yeah, it's tough, right? And again, once you get it going, it's no problem. And, I used to have more regular draft groups that would pop up as well. But this to me, seems like it would be just a no-brainer. It's probably difficult to program or whatever. And again, not high priority. But anyway, great one. I like that idea, and hopefully we get to see that one day.
Since I also have this high stool that I could preach from, there's one feature that used to be there, and they took it away, and it annoys me every single time I draft.
What is it?
Normally when I drafted with Arena, I just drag the card and put it on my pile. But now the piles are getting sorted automatically. So I drop it on my pile and it swaps to another pile. Then I have to look for it while I'm drafting, and I get super annoyed by that. I preferred how it worked the old way.
Yeah. There is something to be said too for, like, if 2 things are roughly equal as far as functionality goes, the one that's already in place should take precedent, because people get used to it, right? Like, it's just what you're used to, even if they're, roughly the same. So you would, so first off, you would make, customizable drafts. And then second, you would say, revert back to the way you used to sort the cards in the draft. Yeah. I like it.
More or less.
You can tell what you do with your spare time on Arena. You're drafting. Okay, let's do a crack-a-pack here. And this will be a jumping off point for a couple of things that I want to touch on with you. Sierko, the first one, of course, is just I want to get your take on the format as a whole, but also this is a crack-a-pack that you actually faced in a draft, right? This is a real-life crack-a-pack?
Yes, and I still didn't play a game of that draft. I drafted it yesterday, but I first picked that I spent literally 59 seconds to decide what to do.
Okay, so let's get into it.
Minus 10 seconds for making a screenshot, but...
Yeah. Yeah, so let's get into it. And this will be interesting because one of the things that I do want to talk about is you were playing the alchemy version of New Capenna here. So we'll have to keep that in mind. I believe there's only one card that it matters for in a pack, but yeah, there it is. So The first card out is Riveteer's Overlook, and then I'll skip to the next one as well, which is Cabaret Courtyard. So we have our choice on either of these two, kind of Evolving Wilds variants.
Yeah, I mean, I picked them quite highly, which we will maybe talk later about, but not these two particular. I mean, I'm more stoked to see the Obscura Maestros and Brokers. So these are sort of secondary for me.
Yeah.
But I think that they're very useful, and especially even if they only overlap with 2 colors, that's absolutely fine.
What about Paragon of Modernity? That's the 4-mana 2/2 flying artifact angel, and you can pay 3 mana to pump it. If you pay 3 different colors, it gets a counter instead of until end of turn.
No, I don't think I'm very much interested. It can be a sideboard card in best of 3.
This is one of my favorite cards in the whole set, Glamorous Outlaw. I love that card.
I mean, yes, it's a fine card, and let's leave it in that.
By fine, you mean amazing, I want to right? Pick it. Incredible. You're having a hard time finding the words to describe how amazingly, incredibly fantastic.
I have absolutely no problem. It's a solid card that plays its role, but also I don't need to pick it so early, so I don't even bother thinking about it at pick 1.
Okay.
I want to see it, I probably wouldn't be super angry if I pick it at pick 6 or maybe 7, but I'd rather wheel it.
Okay. That's disrespectful to the Glamorous Outlaw, but also a reasonable take.
No, that's. I think that shows more or less how underestimated Maestros are by the people, and I think Maestros are closing down to become the best 3-color combination.
Ooh, I like hearing that. All right, so there's a little foreshadowing. Capenna Express, the 4-mana 6/6 that you can sack a treasure to crew it.
I think I'll wait for the next train then.
Yeah, good. You're not even hoping to wheel that one. Daring Escape, red instant, gives a creature +1/+0 and first strike until end of turn, and you scry 1. I was mentioning this to Louise. For a card that is a perfectly serviceable Magic card, like in a vacuum, it just never sees play.
I just think it just doesn't align very well with red. Red is not that type of aggressive, I think. That's the problem.
Yeah. What about Cutthroat Contender, the black 1/1? You can pay a life to pump it +1/+0 until end of turn, but only once each turn.
I think it has its homes, but it's none of the homes I would like to visit.
Is it similar to Daring Escape, where it's just like you're just not looking to be all out aggro with a card like this?
I think that there is some sort of like an all out aggro version of that also uses some Casualty 2 card, because it's a great target to sacrifice for Casualty 2, because you can pump it and get it 2/1 whatever. Plus it has, people try to meme with the atrocious angel. Is it angel? The thing that grows when you lose life or gain life. I think people are trying
it's a vampire. Yeah, I know the one.
Yeah,
the 5-drop.
Yeah. That thing, yeah.
Good luck with that.
As you can see, this pack is absolutely awful so far.
It is bad. There's only one good card. Huh? Yeah, Glamorous Outlaw. Obviously, the
no, I mean the 2 lands are okay. I mean it's okay. The 2 lands are okay.
Come on, I'm just trying to pump up my Glamorous Outlaw. How about Majestic Metamorphosis?
I mean, definitely my pick for now.
Yeah. What about?
It's a great card. It's a good card. It works in all kinds of deck. It works aggressively. It works defensively. People still somehow bump into playing this, targeting a treasure, or even better, some kind of other out of whack artifact that you change into a 4/4 flyer, and they just get completely surprised by that.
Totally.
So yeah, I mean, I love it.
Yeah, really good card. Now, not quite as good as this next one. Can I interest you in an Inspiring Overseer?
Anytime.
Yeah. I mean, is this the best common, since you've been, since 17Lands has come out?
I don't think it's the best common since I've been around. I mean, mind you, I've been around since Tempest. So,
but I'm asking about since 17Lands.
Yeah, since 7.
Because you're an old school drafter, so I know you've seen some stuff you can't unsee, some Rolling Thunders or whatever is, you never get over that. But what about, how long has 17Lands been out now?
I think that Sarulf Packmate was a better card, but it was the color that it was in was not as dominant, and that was the difference there.
Okay, yeah. So
but I think it's in that area. It's in that area, and it's absolutely busted. It's phenomenal.
That brings us to the uncommons. So pretty clearly you're on Inspiring Overseer here.
Yes.
Next is Rob the Archives. This is the 1 in a red sorcery with Casualty 1. You exile the top 2 cards of your library, and you can play those cards this turn.
Honestly, never played with that card. I know that some people like it in some circumstances. I think of all the people that you would think not talking about Limited, Jerry Thompson was high on it. He made an episode on Limited of his stuff, and he was explaining the fake aggro kind of strategy, and Rob the Archives was part of it, when you basically start a bit aggro, and then when you seem to run out of card, you start playing those Rob the Archives, and the one that when it dies, you look at the top 2 cards and you can play. Yeah. So in that kind of applications, obviously it's not as strong as the Overseer, so that's the point. I think that you need to know exactly what you want to do with this card. Don't pick it just because as a filler. You need to fit it into your plan, and that plan is not an easy plan to figure out.
Yeah, I mean, generally I've found Rob the Archives to be very bad, right? Like it's so situational, conditional, and a lot of times, I mean, like, what is the color structure that you want?
It's almost some build around card when you have a particular kind of deck that is quite aggro on the low end and quite heavy on the top end as well, and you sort of try to use this to bridge you to that point.
Yeah, I mean, the issue there, right, is that generally speaking, the deck that you just described is what we would call a bad deck. Right. Where it's like, it has this like extreme aggro low end, and then somehow has this top end that's like good. And then you look at your opening hand and you've got 3 1-drops and a 6-drop, and you're going, what am I doing with my life? Right. But it is true that if you can wedge Rob the Archives directly in between those two, then it can propel you, to a stronger late game. It's just, that's a very, it's a tight wire act that's hard to.
I think we generally talked way too much over a card that is not even close in consideration.
I mean, the reason I brought it up again is because it felt like you made it sound like the card was okay, and it's really not okay.
It needs a very, very niche deck that has a very specific plan, and if you don't have that plan, don't even think about playing that card.
There you go. Now, what about Duskmangler? This was a card that one of the cards I was most excited about when, from the uncommons, when we did the set review. 7 mana, 5/4 is an additional cost to cast it. You can sack a creature, discard a card, or pay 4 life. But when it enters the battlefield, each opponent sacrifices a creature, discards a card, and loses 4 life. So you do one of those things, they have to deal with all 3 of them plus a 5/4. Obviously a very powerful card outright. How has it held up for you in the format?
So I was very low on that card when the set was before the set release, but to my excuse, I thought that you have to do all 3 things yourself when you play it.
Okay.
And then I also, for some inexplicable reason, I thought it was a 4/4. I have no idea why, because it maybe was the pay for life. I thought, whatever. So I thought about a different card that was much worse, but this one is just super sweet. I think it's one of the nicest cards in the set, one of the most powerful uncommons. It has really good numbers as well. It works well with some niche strategies that we'll have Reanimate including.
Yep.
But also very often when you play it late in the game, it just is the thing that completely changes you start on parity, you play this one, you're heavily favored. That's basically what happens.
Yeah.
Obviously, exactly. 7 mana is not something that you can just pay nilly-willy, so you have to build a deck that will last to that 7 mana. But if you have a deck that can last longer, and I think that, Maestros is the family that comes to mind when you want to play Duskmangler, then you're perfect spot to play it.
Yeah, and that's where I came down on it too. I mean, the big question we had was, is this a format where you get to cast 7 mana spells? And the answer is, well, sometimes, but you do have to earn it. It is not set up that you automatically get to do so. You absolutely can die quite quickly, but it turns out, as you said, in Maestros, they do have the tools to keep themselves alive to resolve a Duskmangler. I like that a lot. Next one is A Little Chat. That's the 1 in a blue instant with Casualty 1. You look at the top 2 cards of your library, put one of them in your hand and the other on the bottom of your library.
I think it's a serviceable card. I think it would be much better if this format was a bit more build around heavy, and you would be looking for that one particular card that is essential for your deck.
That's how I feel too. It ends up playing out like a pretty deep, like you said, a serviceable card selection or occasionally card advantage card. But I don't know. It feels like it just was going to be this, like, you have played in the sacrifice deck, you played in this deck that wants to recur stuff, and it just ends up being just sort of exactly what it says on the card too often. All right, so this next card is an alchemy card. It's called Arming Gala. It is 3 green white for an enchantment. It says at the beginning of your end step, creatures you control and creature cards in your hand, library, and graveyard perpetually get +1/+1. So first off, what does it do? Right? Because like these stupid cards, you have to know extra words. Like you have to know what perpetually means, not just in English, but in Magic terms this time. And it doesn't explain that on the card.
Perpetually means basically forever. And this is the mechanic that exists in online only because you need digital cards to play it. What it does is basically at the end of your turn, every card on your battlefield, but also every creature on your battlefield, but also every creature card in your hand or in your library will get +1/+1. Next turn, they get another +1/+1, and forever they will be this +1/+1 that they accumulate from Arming Gala. Even if they destroy the Arming Gala, those +1/+1 bonuses will stay. So, for example, if you have your Inspiring Overseer and Arming Gala was already for 2 turns on your battlefield, and you draw it, you don't draw a 2/1 Inspiring Overseer, you draw a 4/3 Inspiring Overseer, and you play it, and at the end of that turn, it will become a 5/4. So every single turn, they will grow. Everything
That's pretty
in your deck,
incredible.
In your hand, in your graveyard as well, so if you have any reanimation, they will come back bigger. Yeah.
That's pretty incredible, right? I mean, it is 5 mana and triggers on end step, so, you do have to kind of let that train get rolling. But, I mean, in my experience, just giving all your creatures +1/+1 is already, a game-changing card. And +2/+2 is like already hugely powerful, right? Especially if I can top deck creatures that come with that bonus attached to them.
Yeah, it's basically if you can prolong a game when you have this in play and you keep it in play, then anything you draw, like draw a 1/1, it's a 4/4 now, and you play it for 1 mana, and what does the poor opponent can do about it? So
exactly.
I never played with that card. I just drafted it recently, just a spoiler alert of what I picked from this pack. But I'm not convinced if that was the right pick from this pack so far. But
that's right, because
let's not go ahead. To me, it looks like a powerful card, and because I never played, I didn't play that many of those alchemy drafts. I wanted to try new cards.
Yeah.
So this one was a very appealing for me because I see that it's potentially powerful. I don't know exactly how powerful it is. I want to check it. I know exactly what Inspiring Overseer does. I know it's strong, but once I start the new format, I'd rather be experimenting a bit, even if it costs me equity.
Yeah. And this does feel like the beginning of a format, but you get to just look down at very specific cards to try them out in a context you're already used to. And by the way, there's not just the Inspiring Overseer that was pulling Sierkovitz, maybe I should just take that over the Arming Gala. The rare is also a nice one. It's Falco Spara, Pact Weaver, and that's the broker's boss, right? Head of the family, if you will. It's the 1 green, blue, white 3/3 flying trampler that gets counters on it. You can remove them to effectively draw cards. It's a really strong card as well. And it's in, if it's available, it's in the strongest family as well.
Yeah, and that was also not a very easy decision for me.
Pack.
Yeah, I think that it would be super interesting to maybe put it on the LR Twitter and ask the people what would they pick, because this is I don't know if I picked it right, and I'm not convinced. I probably the saddest thing is that Inspiring Overseer is probably still the pick.
I know, that's what I was going to say.
That's how busted the card is. But I was jumping between while I was watching the clock tick, and I was thinking, I want to try this Arming Gala, but I know Falco Spara is really strong. And then I said, okay, but I'm passing all those broker cards. Maybe I should even go controversially towards Dusk Mangler. But then I decided, be responsible, pick powerful cards, not the card in the color that doesn't exist in the pack. So I quickly discarded that possibility. And then I was basically coin flipping between the Overseer and the Gala, and in the end decided to pick the Gala just to try something new, basically.
Yeah, but you've given yourself a bit of an excuse there, right? You're like, well, I want to try out the new cards. I may not get a chance to play this card again. And I think that makes sense. That's a totally reasonable thing to do. I am curious, though, if I put you at a Pro Tour, right? So you sit down, let's say it's day 2 of a Pro Tour, you're in a tough pod, you had a good day 1, you're in pod 3 or something, let's say. So, some very good players, and you can't mess around. What would you take out of that?
Like, hopefully, if I was at the Pro Tour and the format was Alchemy Draft, I would have played it more than twice before. So that's the difficult part of putting myself in that position, because I didn't play with the Gala enough. But my gut feeling tells me I would be picking Inspiring Overseer.
Okay. Yeah, that's what my gut tells me too. We had a Crack-A-Pack last week or the week before, I can't remember. Or no, it wasn't a Crack-A-Pack. It was just a pack out of a draft that I had played. And I had to pick between Inspiring Overseer and Reservoir Kraken. And I had the same gut feeling that you did. The Kraken has performed very well for me. It's single color, although double pips, but still it's just blue. That's a color that I'm very happy to be in to start off with. And so, my initial was like, I'll take the Kraken, that's good. But I sat there and stared at it, and I really said, like, gut check, honestly, what do you think leads to more wins? And my gut actually told me the Overseer would, and I took it.
That's was chat present? Did they try to stone you for that?
No. So this was actually a video for CFB. I have not looked at the comments. I usually don't. I've been doing content creation too long to look at comments on draft videos at this point. But I don't know. They may roasted me for that pick. I have no idea. But my gut, it wasn't strong. Like, I think I could have flipped a coin and had a really similar scenario. I didn't, it wasn't like this is obvious to me, but I was like, look, take this pick seriously, put yourself on day 2 of a PT where you really have to, like, there's a lot on the line here. And I took the Overseer. I don't know if it was correct, of course. I think that we did look it up on 17Lands and the Overseer was slightly higher, games in hand win rate, but it was slight. It wasn't like an obvious, situation. They were very close in power level. So anyway, interesting. And you did, though, you said end up taking the Army Gala here. And that I think is like I said, for the reasons that you said, that makes perfect sense. I would have actually done the exact same thing if I was sitting at home on Arena. I want to see how that card plays. It just looks cool. It looks really powerful. I don't know how important these are, but I gravitate towards cards that simplify game plans. And cards like this do. My whole game plan is to have creatures on the battlefield and in my hand and library, right? And resolve this card and let it just sit there for a turn or two. Like, once I do that, I feel like I'm going to be in a really good position to win the game. And I actually value that a lot. Other types of cards that do this, the one in this set's not super great, but a card like wiretapping, anything that like lets you draw 2 cards a turn. I love cards like that. Like, once again, they simplify your game plan. If I can resolve a card like wiretapping and then just exist for a few turns, I will be able to generate an advantage off of it. And I value that actually quite highly. Cards that change the dynamic of the game and put you on a very straightforward path to victory. If you can simply, achieve a relatively simple goal, like have creatures on the battlefield or don't die for 3 turns or something like that.
Yeah, and in the end, I indeed ended up in Cabaretti deck that has basically 10 or so ways of putting multiple creatures on board in one turn, like with double Rocco and stuff like that. So,
have you had a chance to play it? Have you played it?
No, I drafted it yesterday quite late, and I didn't have a chance to play it. I didn't even have a chance to make the final cuts because it's quite a tricky one. But we only have a Crack-A-Pack, not build my deck segment. So I guess
no, totally. I'm just curious to see how the Gala plays out. So make sure you tweet about it. Where can people see you on Twitter?
Yeah, on Twitter, I'm still Sierkovitz. It's all the same.
Okay, yeah. I'm just giving you. We'll be able to let you do the plug at the end, but just in case anybody wants to catch up with you on your draft, you have to give us the full review on the Gala. You might be the only one of us who actually gets to play the card.
Well, that's true. That's not. But actually, yeah, I think that the alchemy format is pretty okay to play. I played a couple of drafts and they are a bit swingy because 2 rares per pack. You're gonna get decks that are quite bomb heavy. But the gameplay is interesting, and I am one of those people that takes the loss to a bomb quite stoically. I just that happened. I guess there was nothing I could do. I only get angry when there was something I could do and I made a mistake. So
you didn't. Yeah. I did want to ask you about the alchemy thing because, while we've got you on the show, I'd love to get your take on it. We talked about, Luis and I talked about alchemy, when it first came out, but that was constructed only. And I had a bit of a rant on that show where I said, why don't we have alchemy for limited? This seems like a perfect place to be able to craft a limited environment a little bit more well-roundedly, right? For example, if Wizards of the Coast decides that they want to put a flashy, multicolored legendary creature in a set, like outside of New Capenna, let's say, a regular 2-color set, that maybe would appeal to like the commander crowd, right? It fills in some gap or supports a strategy maybe that they hadn't quite covered yet. They have to shoehorn that into the packs that us limited players are also drafting. And a lot of times you'll see those like really crazy gold cards not really supported by the format. Like they're very difficult to cast or they don't really fit in with what everything else is doing. There's also, of course, cards that are designed specifically for constructed, for standard, or even later, formats, modern, historic, pioneer, something like that are just really, really powerful, like rares and mythic rares that don't really fit into the limited environment. Like it's obviously okay to do big, powerful, splashy things. I think that's it's fun to have really powerful rares, but some of them are just obscene and you would never put that type of card in a regular limited format because it's tough to interact with, or it just doesn't fit with what else is going on. And you would tweak those down a little bit, not make them like uncommons. You can still have bomby, splashy stuff, but maybe take hexproof off of it or make it a mana more expensive or something like that to have it fit in so that it's a little bit more well-rounded and not this like obscene blowout when you cast it, that type of thing. Right. And so when I think about these, that was what I was hoping for if they're going to mess around with alchemy when it comes to limited. But that doesn't really seem to be the approach that they've taken, at least with this first shot at it.
Yeah, so I think that this set is a great example for what power alchemy could have. Because I don't know if you agree with me, but I think that this set was badly balanced in general. Brokers are too powerful, and now people are getting on to draft it in an appropriate way, and by that I mean supporting 5 probably players on the pod for any of the combinations that includes broker cards. But in the beginning it was just way too open, and the broker decks were basically unbeatable for anything else, and that was not fun to play because I like to explore the format and maybe try some other combinations of colors, and I'm playing drafts not to win per se. I mean, obviously the goal is to win, but I want to win on my terms, and my terms is I win by trying some weird things and building new. And I think that the first half of the Streets of New Capenna was just basically me having to make that critical decision. Do you want to win any single game, or do you want to have fun?
Yes.
But on the other hand, the fun means building some deck that would be good on paper, but will completely lose because all the tempo cards from brokers were just ripping it apart.
Right.
And I think that if they're going to release this alchemy in the middle of the season, that's a perfect moment to use the power of being able to modify those digital cards, not only to introduce those alchemy cards into the draft format, but also to change the cards that are problematic or that are problematic because they're too powerful or not enough powerful in the format, and sort of rebalance it and check if it can bring some new life to it. And I understand that Wizards not going to do it in the draft where you keep the cards, because it would be way too confusing for people to have, well, I drafted this limited card, it was a 4/3, now I have it in my collection, it's a 4/2, and it had trample, and now it has vigilance. What's going on with that?
Right.
But I think that, those alchemy drafts, they can be drafts with alchemy cards, with the modified cards from the current set, and they could be phantom, but you get the packs as prizes for the alchemy set, so you can build your alchemy collection through those packs that you would open or something like that. I guess.
Yeah. So you and I are actually aligned then on that the space we see would be to do similar to what they did in Constructed, where they took like groups of cards, that they felt missed, like for example, the dungeon, sub theme or whatever from AFR. They felt that it missed for Constructed, so they bumped up a group of them, and then that all of a sudden they actually won the Pro Tour with it. But where they said, look, we've got a broad strokes problem with white being too good or the tempo place being too good in brokers or whatever, and we could knock those down or bring a few other things up that didn't really work. But what we see instead are them once again kind of going off the deep end with it, right? By implementing these much more extreme designs that are very digital card based. They're not really tweaking numbers. The changes you made were like, okay, we'll take off a toughness, we'll change trample into vigilance. These are things that you could see in paper as well, right? But what we're really talking about here are digital specific, digital only cards, which of course is a really cool, fun space to play for card designers and for players to get to explore. But man, I was really hoping that we might get a world where they tweaked the original designs to kind of shore up some weaknesses that they maybe found after, it was released.
Yeah, but I think they should do both, basically, because we know that this format was not perfectly balanced. Mm-hmm. We knew that the Riveteers and to some extent Cabaretti are misses, and Gruul especially is a big miss. So basically you have 10 color combinations, 3 of them are close to unplayable. And then you release this extra set with those alchemy cards, which I understand they have to release, and I'm glad that they do it in this format, because I know that Constructed players, well, it must have been terrible for them to have to buy those cards and or craft them from wild cards. I think that having draft is beneficial for us because we have more Constructed players getting interested in draft.
Yeah.
But at the same time, this is a perfect opportunity to tune those little things, because you don't want to change the main set because it will be, again, confusing. But you release this alchemy thing, just treat it as a sort of like maybe an exercise in estimating how could you tweak a format to make it better draftable, because they will have a massive sample size of slight tweaks on cards, and they could see if adding this toughness here and there could change the complete balance of the cards.
Yeah, it's also interesting because I wonder what they could learn from that too, right?
Yeah.
Like where. If a format does get unbalanced, there's some intuitive things that we take away from it and that become accepted knowledge, right? Like, oh, well, white's too powerful or whatever, the 2-drops, or, these things that you say, I say, Luis says, people that are limited kind of pundits will say this type of stuff. And then as a group, we all kind of agree like, hey, brokers is too busted and that kind of stuff. But as I'm sure you've seen a lot in your regular career and then also your work with 17Lands on Magic stuff, that sometimes the collected wisdom isn't necessarily correct, or it might be correct, but for a different reason, than people conceptualize. And I do wonder, I can't imagine that Wizards has access to that type of information regularly. Maybe they do, maybe they have a bunch of back-end stuff from Arena and Magic Online that they can use to compare notes and stuff. But, it would be interesting to drill down into, hey, we've had balance issues with this set, and this set. Is there a thread, that says, hey, we've missed because we didn't shore up this one weakness over and over again, and then that's what ended up creating these differences in power level that were enough that our player base noticed it? Because, I'll tell you, to kind of put a wrap on this subtopic here, Sierko, it's, you said for the first half of the format or whatever, it felt unbalanced and all these things. And, look, for people like you and me and probably most of our listeners, fine, we'll adjust, we'll take whatever you throw at us. But there's a lot of people who are like,
That's it.
I was going to do a few more, but I'm kind of done with this. And then they don't come back, and the format gets kind of left behind. So that's just another thing to keep in mind. One of the things that I did want to ask you broad strokes about New Capenna, because I love getting your take when you come on the show, because usually you have a little bit of a different take than like what Luis and I are very like-minded with each other. So we tend to agree quite a bit. And one of the things that him and I have talked about pretty extensively on the show is the idea that you want to draft your deck to be primarily in 2 colors and then a little bit of a third. Like most of the decks are 3 colors, but they're not full on, 7-7-6 splits on your, ability to make these colors of mana. It's heavy blue-white with a little bit of green, heavy green-white with a little bit of blue, those type of decks instead. What's your take on that, on how the colors break down for New Capenna?
Okay, stop being attacked by my cat.
Cat gets to come on the show too.
He really wants to be on camera, I think.
Yeah.
But I had a very different opinion about it in general.
I like that. Give it to us. 4-color?
I think that in this format, yes. I'm not going to I'm not going to pretend that 2-color decks are not strong in this format. But I think that once you look at the data about the win rates of particular color combinations and generally how many colors are there in the deck, from what I've seen, once you have the 3-color decks that have very, very responsible mana bases, the difference between 2-color decks win rate and 3-color decks win rates disappears. Okay. So basically there are pros of drafting 3 colors and cons of drafting 3 colors. The pro is you get access to 3 colors, which is, no-brainer. You got more power there because in 3 colors you will find more powerful cards. Maybe one of the colors will be more open. You're more likely to find that kind of lane where the one color is more open and you'll get rewarded in later things. Plus you get those very powerful 3-color cards, which, like Disciplined Duelist, like the Corpse Appraiser. These are super powerful cards that only 3-color decks will have access to. So you get like partial immunity of being cut off because you will always find at least one color and one lane somewhat open from my experience. But of course the problem is the mana, and that's the problem that I'm not going to ignore at all. And I did data on that when I basically looked at win rates of 3-color decks, and I looked at the 3-color decks that have at least four spells of the 3rd color in them. And I looked at how many sources of the 3rd color you would need to have. Okay. And I didn't, of course, count, of course, having a 6/6/5 mana base is absolutely atrocious. So what I calculated is how many theoretical land sources of the 3rd color you have in your deck. And theoretical sources, if I have a dual that is green-red, I count it as a red and a green source. If I have one of those sacrifice lands that have green, red, and white, I will count it as all green, red, and white. Of course, it's not that easy because you will have to make a decision there.
Right.
But in theory, you have access to all 3 colors and like that. And when I did it, it showed that basically you have to have at least 6 to 7 sources of that 3rd color in your deck, and then your win rates were on par with the 2-color decks.
Wow, that's a lot, right? Like 6 to 7
is a lot, but when you think about it, 6 it means you will have to have 4 to 5 of those fixing lands. So either the 3-colored lands or the 2-colored, the ones that you draw a card, or also the 3-colored lands that only touch 2 of your colors because they are perfect for fixing there as well. You can use them in your 3-color deck. And also, if you pick them quite early, even if you're in different 3 colors, but you see that one of those colors is slightly cut, you can actually pivot into the other one because you have that possibility when you have the off-colored trio, let's call it. So just to give you some number, we think about fixing when we look at the previous sets, and those sets usually had Evolving Wilds, and that was basically it. Like the last proper 3-color set was Ikoria. Proper-ish 3-color set was Ikoria. And in Ikoria, every pod, you opened 6.6 lands that could fix into your 3 colors. And they were only dual.
In the pod, okay.
Yeah, in the whole pod. And out of those 6.6, when you look at how those things got into the draft, you saw around 5 of them in your draft on average.
Okay.
In Streets of New Capenna, you open an average of 12 fixing lands per pod. And unlike in Ikoria, at least some of them, at least 2.4 of them will be in all 3 colors at the same time, because you will get those Triome sacrifice lands. And you will see 7.5 of them during the draft. So you see 7.5. You need to pick only 5. So you have the access to the fixing if you want to. It's just that sometimes you have to prioritize it over something else. Like my last draft, I went into Maestros very quickly because I opened a Maestro good card, and then and then Corpse Appraiser on pick 2, and then I was at 2 straight Maestro cards, and then third pick I had Maestro's Theater, and I picked it because I knew, look, I have to have the fixing if I want to stay in those Maestros because I'm already getting rewards there.
Yeah.
And the problem is that it so turned out in the draft that I only saw the fixing cards in the same packs that had good 2-drops, and I prioritized my mana over the 2-drops. I still got some of them, that's fine, and I got some cheap removal, and I managed to trophy with that deck because I had excellent fixing, because my mana was not 6/6/5, my mana was 9/8/7.
Oh, really good mana, yeah.
And when you have like 9/8 is already a good mana for 2-color deck, and then 7 in the third color, I basically played in the same deck. I played Body Snatchers and Snooping Newsies, and there was no problem with that because I could schedule the decks correctly. The only problem with that is that when you play like this, and especially in this format when all those lands come into play tapped, I think that the essential thing is planning when you draft your deck, when to make the stops of your drops of your tap lands. And of course, turn 1 is the obvious one because then you play it. You basically don't have 1-drops in this format, and I think it's a feature. But then you can think about some cards. Like, for example, this is not my idea, but someone else's I'm nicking right now blatantly. They said that even if you don't have a 2-drop, you can play Strangle on turn 2 and play a tap land, and you're good because you don't lose any ground.
Yeah.
This is more of my take. I think that Make Disappear, the 2-mana counterspell, is so amazing because you can not play a 3-drop, but play a tap land, keep up Make Disappear, and they can't do anything about it.
Yes.
They can either play into your Make Disappear, you counter it, and you probably got ahead on mana, or they don't play anything, and you just got the tap land on the board scot-free.
Yeah.
Another example that I have is the Civil Servant, the 2/3 in white-green, because you think, okay, aggressive decks, they will have a problem with that. But you can think that you play the Civil Servant on turn 2, and on turn 3 you play a tap land, you maybe put the Mountain on the board through the Cabaretti Courtyard, and then you play the 1/1 that puts a +1/+1 counter on something. Mm-hmm. And you put the +1/+1 counter on Civil Servant, you attack with it, tap the other guy to give it +1/+0 and lifelink. You just attacked for 4 lifelink without using 3 mana on your third turn, but by playing the tap land. So if you manage to design your deck in the way that you have those spots to play those additional tap lands, then you can easily play that. And then you can get into the full potential of the 3-color decks. But I think that the important part is that in those decks particularly, you want to probably load on 2-drops because you are happy to play them because that gives you the spots to play the third land tapped. You probably want to load on 3-drops, but not because you want to have 3-drops, but because most of the 3-color cards are 3-drops. So you will want to have them because you want to have the 3-color cards from the 3 colors that you selected, because that would mean that you benefited from it being open.
Right.
And then you might have some gap because those 3-drops are so powerful, and then you might load up on something more powerful and maybe use the turn 4 to double spell, or maybe turn 5 to play another tap land or something like that. So yeah. You sacrifice a bit of explosive starts.
Yeah.
But the card power might keep you in the game because you can play the 3-drop that is as good as a 4-drop because it costs 3 different colors.
Right. And you actually have the mana to support it. So the interesting part to me about this is trying to break down what risks you're taking on, because I get what you're saying. If you draft straight up 2 colors, then your mana is better. You're more likely to be able to cast your spells, and you're more likely to be able to curve out. But during the draft portion, you get an extra benefit of not having to prioritize mana fixing as highly as you would if you were three colors, but with the drawback being that you don't get access to some cards, right? There's a third color that you maybe are touching or not playing enough of that you're going to have to take a less powerful option that's in your primary two colors rather than the big splash. And then the reverse is true when you go for the three colors, in that you have this more open card pool for you to pull cards from, but it's limited by the fact that you do need to prioritize taking the fixing, which sometimes means that you're taking that instead of the more powerful option that you were going to have. So this is an interesting dynamic to me. How do you see it coming out in the wash? Like, are you taking on more risk going into the three color, but also being rewarded roughly equally for it?
So I think my default position is I will try to draft one of the good two color combinations. Mm-hmm. Unless it's black blue, where I'm probably already trying to start to lean Maestros, because the Maestros cards, in my opinion, are just so powerful. Mm-hmm. The actual three color things, because the Diabolist is great, the Corpse Appraiser is amazing. Well, I mean, I'm not even talking about Hostile Takeover. Please, Scorcha, but at least don't click the keyboard, okay?
Your cat's jumping on the keyboard. What did he type something out to us? Is he giving us draft advice?
No, he tried to, but I stopped him in the right moment.
Oh man, silenced him, huh?
So yeah, and also that's one thing that I forgot to say. Also, especially in Maestros, I don't want to be splashing one color. Because then I will probably tend to be on three sources of that color or something like that, maybe four. And when I'm doing, and when I'm milling 7 cards per game, the risk of me milling all my mountains and then ending up with, I have this fixing, but that is rough. My mountain is a bit risky. So actually, I probably will prefer to play a deck that will be more evenly on the mana basis because of that, and especially those color combinations.
Okay. Now, one thing
my default is 2 colors, but if I see powerful 3 colors and fixing going slightly later, I'm going to jump on it. And I think that.
And you're going to jump on it all the way in. You're talking about you're willing to be full 3 colors.
I'm not dipping my toe there.
Yeah, that's the difference.
Because if I'm dipping my toe, I will not prioritize the mana fixing correctly.
Right.
I really have to commit to that and hope that I'm going to be rewarded by being in 3 colors rather than 2 by seeing more cards basically and having much smaller chance of being cut off. Because I mean, in the end, I'm picking those cards because I see a 4th pick 3-color card or something, which means that at least 3, which is probably a segue to signals.
Well, yeah, right before we get to that though, I did want to bring up one other thing, which was you mentioned that there's is it newer functionality on 17Lands where you can you can group players based on their win rate?
Yes, that's the newest tool that the guys at 17Lands developed in Blood, Sweat, and Tears.
It breaks players down into 3 broad tiers, like roughly the top 1/3, the bottom 1/3, and the middle 1/3 of players based on their win rate.
Yeah, roughly. Mm-hmm. So the general numbers are, for a very good reason, kept secret, and you don't know, even if you're a 17Lands user, you don't know in which tier you are, not to make any field bets or whatever. Mm-hmm. But in general, it divides people into categories based on the performance in the last 3 formats. So it takes into account mainly players that are a bit more invested because they need to play at least for the last 3 formats with some frequency. And then they look at your win rates in those 3 formats. If they were high enough, you get into the top tier. If they were slightly lower, you get into this middle one. And if they were a bit lower, then you get into the bottom 1/3. These are usually people that are still learning the ropes in terms of how they play their drafts. So the problem of data that many people, I think Mike Sigrist always is a good example of someone that was critical towards the data, and for the right reasons, saying that those average aggregates might not be representative of what he wants to do because he's got better plans. And I completely agree with that. I think that if you're at a certain level, your own plans might be better than the data. I think that the more you have to learn, the more you can learn from the data. The less you have to learn, the maybe less useful the data can be for you, even though you still will learn some things from that. But because now we have this division into the 3 different archetypes, you can actually look at those data and try to figure out how the top players do things differently than the other groups.
Did you see any difference with the colors, like that we were just talking about?
So yeah. Obviously, the irony of my whole argument is that the top players play 3-color decks much less. So I think that the lower group played it 65% of the time, and the top players played it only 54% of the time. So there's like 10 percentage point difference between how often they play the 3 colors. But it's mainly because they can position themselves so well in being the 2 colors, because they read the signals better, and they know. They also play the 2 colors more frequently, and the lower tier is playing them less frequently. It also might be something with the mentality of the players that newer players tend to try to do what Wizards tells them to do.
Yes.
And if they said, this is a 3-color set, okay, I'm drafting 3 colors then, I guess. And it's I think it's right of them to do.
It's is right of them.
This is not the right thing to be happening.
I mean, this is to me, this is a miss, right? Like if it's like, hey, here's a sweet new 3-color set, but you know what you're really rewarded for? Restraint, discipline, right? It's like these are not like, I want to be free to just go nuts and draft, what my ideal for a set like this would be. I'm definitely going to be 3 colors. The question is, am I splashing a 4th? And instead, it's the opposite of that. I'm going to be 2 colors. I might splash a 3rd, right? And to me, that's a design miss by a little bit, not a disaster by any stretch. But I agree with you. If the set is telling you that this is what you should do, this is what you get to do for this set that you don't normally, and the incentives are actually lined up to have you not do that, then there's a little bit of a disconnect there.
Yeah, indeed. So the differences are not that big, because the 2-color decks, it's 14% of the bottom group, and the top group is 21%. But where the difference lie, and is interesting, it's almost exclusively Azorius. Mm-hmm. So the top players play Azorius more than 2 times more frequently than the lower group. So wow. It's not 9% of decks of the top players were Azorius, and 4% of the lower group was Azorius. Wow. And Azorius with Splash also the similar kind of difference.
Yeah.
And the weirdest thing, the lower ability group had more Brokers deck actually than the top ones. Because I think that the data that I used was from slightly later in the format, when people started weaning off because they knew that that those decks were actually challenged by now.
Overdrafted. Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I mean, we have been talking a lot on the show about the 2-color and about blue-white. Luis was really big on blue-white early, and I guess nobody tell him, but that's pretty validating to hear that. I do want to talk about signals, Sierkovitz. I want to talk about them in a big picture as well.
Big picture. Okay. Yeah. By the way, if mini mid plug, but I have much more extended versions of those arguments about the top bottom players in my seminars, and also about the signals, because obviously we can't make one episode of LR into 6 hours of my data seminars, because you can't.
Do you have a specific one that I could link?
Yes, I have the reading draft signals one. Yeah, that's on YouTube, I think.
Well, I meant about the comparing.
Yeah, I have also that. Yeah. I have.
So because I'll put both of those in the show notes for people that want to go super deep and check it out, because like you said.
Yes, I have to say that they are quite deep. Yeah. I try to make them accessible, but I don't try very hard to make them accessible. So
right. I mean, you're a data scientist. Like, scientists are good at producing this information, but it can be difficult to get it across to a broader audience. I mean, in many ways, that's because you can't, right? Like, people want to have really complex things distilled down to bite-sized chunks, but a lot of things that are worth learning about aren't distillable in that way. Right. There's too many exceptions. There's too many things. But if you do want to take the time to go deeper, I'll put a link to the signals one and then the player tier one as well in the show notes that you did, so that people who are interested can get the full deal. But anyway,
give me signal to give me feedback as well, what they do wrong if you ever hear it. So that's fine. So generally, I like, again, a boffin a nerd, a scientist in me, likes to get definitions. And when I started doing the signal one, I said, what is actually the definition of a signal? So I checked a couple of them, and one is from information theory, and that's function that conveys information about something. And one was from biology, and that was action done by an organism to alert other organisms. And I think that combining those is pretty perfect for the signals in the draft. That is
pretty good.
Because you convey information by doing your draft selections, and those actions done by you as an organism alert other organisms.
It's true.
Now, the point is that it's a mixture of information you're giving willingly and the mixture of information that you don't want to give away. Mm-hmm. Like you open the last pack that we had in the pick segment of this
in the
podcast.
Cracker Pack, yeah,
in the Cracker Pack, exactly. And you pick this white green card, but you also pass a busted broker's mythic and an inspiring overseer. This is a signal you're sending that you don't want to send,
right?
Because the signal that it gives is like, well, go into the brokers. It's all gang ho. So probably you don't want that. But sometimes you willingly send the signal, and I do it very often in my drafts when there is a decent card in a color I'm absolutely not interested in, and I know that I'm not interested in, not going to be interested in it. I don't steal it from the other player. I pass it because I know that if I send this signal, there's more chance of someone actually picking that card and not deciding, oh, I don't have enough playables. Maybe I should look somewhere else, like in the color that I'm
colors
picking.
I'm in. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm not going to play that person because we're not playing pod drafts. In pod drafts, that will be a different story. But I'm happily passing good cards that I'm not interested in because I know that this will increase the chance of me getting good cards later in the draft. It is a very small increase, but I'm taking that. Mm-hmm. So the problem is that the signal is based on our perception. It's not that someone literally says something, unless you're the LGS and they look, what is this doing in the pack?
Well, yeah, then, why is this still here?
That's quite a strong signal and quite a direct one. But signals are generally ambiguous, so you have to second guess. What is important is that, when we think about signals like, oh, what is this still doing in the pack? But lots of signals in draft are going to be based on absence as well. So you open the first pack, you know what cards were in there, something doesn't come back, that's a signal for you because lack of that card is a very, very valid information. And I didn't dive into the data on the wheel signals. I think I will do it in the next format. But I think that this is like one of the most powerful analytic tools. Just make that screenshot of your first pick, and see what didn't come back and try to, because there you have the full information.
Yes.
And one thing that I did in the seminar is just basically define that signals have a range, a strength, and a specificity. Range, the strength being like, okay, this happens very rarely in the draft. And actually, when I did this analysis, I looked at how rarely certain things happen. So to give you an example, seeing Sanctuary Warden after pick one in pack one, it never happens. It happened 4 times per 10,000 drafts.
Okay.
So if you see the Sanctuary Warden in your first pack, that almost never happens. Now, if you look at the third pack, that will happen sometimes because on a third pack, people will not go into the double white card if they're not white already. So you might get it a bit later. So, but this is like a signal that will happen so rarely that you probably shouldn't pay notice to it. You just thank whatever divine creature you believe in that you got it so late, and then pick it easily.
Yeah. Now wait a minute. To back, you said range, specificity, and power. Was that what was the last one?
There was strength, range, and specificity.
Strength. Okay.
Specificity by specificity mean it's how relevant this signal is for you.
Okay, so what was that example that you gave? What did that illustrate? The extreme rarity of getting a card that powerful.
That's a very strong signal, but it has a very, very small range because you will only see it as a pick 2. So it only tells you something about one person.
Okay.
Now, if you have a card like Murder, like Murder, you will probably see 85% of murders. You will still travel to the pick 2. Roughly half of murders will travel to pick 3.
Okay.
Roughly 1/3 of murders will travel to pick 4. And roughly 10% of murders will travel to pick 6. So if you see a murder pick 6, you know that 10% a person that's sitting 6 seats from you opens a murder, 10% of the time it will get to you. So it's rare.
Yeah.
It's not something that will never happen. But it's frequent enough to give you good information. It means that at least 5 people before you passed murder to you. So either they don't value it or they're not in black. And I think that, first person might have picked a good rare. Second person may be a good uncommon, but a third person not picking murder is already starting to be something meaningful, because it will mean that at least there is a suggestion that the black color is open. So you can sort of conclude it based on that. And that's how I started the analysis, by basically checking how quickly those cards deplete with each pick, because with the data you can actually look, and I literally have those massive graphs of every single common in the set and how quickly they deplete from the packs. Because if I look at the draft data, I don't know what was open because I only have the draft data from the 17Lands user. But I know that on average, on each seat, the same number of murders was open. So if I see 5,000 murders in my pack 1, pick 1, I know that the person next to me also opened the people in the drafts next to me also opened around 5,000 murders, like give or take, 5% or so. So if I see only 85% of that number in my second pick as the user of 17Lands, I know that 15% disappeared, because 15% of the time when people open a murder, they first pick it.
Right.
So based on that, I can calculate everything for like.
Oh, that's interesting. That's really cool.
And some cards deplete very, very quickly. So you will see 100% in your first pick, and then 20% in your second pick, and then nothing in third pick. These will usually be rares, maybe like the most powerful uncommons. Commons usually arrive to they deplete around pick 6. Oh, they half around pick 6, pick 7. You see half of them.
And so, mana cost matters for these too?
No, I think it's mainly power that matters. Like the three most disappearing commons in the set were Murder, Overseer, Jewel Thief, and Strangle.
Okay.
Something that you wouldn't be very much surprised. And actually, I did those very fancy curves, but when you go to 17Lands data, you can just look at the ALSA number. And just a quick description of what ALSA is when you average see the card last in the pack. So if I open the thing and I take it from my pack, I've seen it as the first pick, and then I never saw it later from that pack. If I opened it in my pack, I've seen it, but I passed it and it wheeled to me. I've seen it as a 9. That's the number when I see it last. And based on that, you can sort of calculate how late the cards go. And the higher the number, the later the card goes. So if something has ALSA of 1, you only see it when you open it. If something has ALSA of 3, you will see it frequently as the third pick and probably later than that. So based on that number, you can also sort of figure out how late do you see those cards and how quickly they deplete. And obviously, the cards with the very low ALSA, the ones that you only see as first pick, they deplete almost instantly because you never see them after the first pick.
Right. I'm just taking a look, like you said, it is interesting. The top 5 commons are actually one from each color, which is kind of cool. But they are...
it's not it's a design. I mean, there was an interview with Carmen Handy when she was talking about they wanted to print Murder at common. And it was a conscious decision of the design team that to print Murder at common, every color will get a very powerful common. Oh. And it's Inspiring Overseer, Strangle, Murder, Jewel Thief, and Echo
Inspector.
Yeah. Is that the 5th one?
It is, yeah.
So they nailed that part of the design.
They did.
Except for the fact that the Inspiring Overseer is a bit too powerful, in my opinion.
Yeah, there is a range here for the ALSA. 2.24 is the Inspiring Overseer, but for Echo Inspector, it's up to 3.5.
So you see Echo Inspector slightly later by one and a half picks on average. So that's what the number means, basically.
But you're viewing these as just straight power level, because the thing that I'm thinking about is...
No, it's not power level. I'm not seeing it as a power level. That's the thing.
Well, that's what I asked about the color commitment.
Signal is based on percent. I mean, it's linked with power, but it's not necessarily linked with power, because there are some categories of cards that players on Arena, on average, prefer more. This is not the power. This is the signal of the strength of the signal. It's basically, you can't judge signals by how you evaluate a card. Because, for instance, if you're drafting some weird strategy that likes a particular common, like Battlefield Raptor from Kaltheim, or is it too early? That was a one
no,
drop,
that's
one
okay.
fire. If you evaluate this card highly and you see it because you think that the card is strong, it doesn't mean that it's a signal, because if the rest of the pod doesn't value this card highly, it doesn't mean anything about white. Because these cards are having such a low alpha, it means that everyone in every pod is going to evaluate them quite highly, which means, and most of the time people evaluate cards highly because they're powerful, but not always. Very often, average arena user is evaluating not so good removal pretty highly. You will see that the white kill attacking creature removal is quite high on that list, probably, even though the card is not good.
Kill shot, it is pretty high on the list. Actually, it looks like it's top 10.
It's not a good card. That's it. It's not a good card, but removal is usually, someone told them that bombs removal that matters. Yeah, and people draft it like this now. So basically, it means that this is a good signal for white. It doesn't mean you have to pick it. But you know that you get like a late kill shot, that increases the chance that white is open on that pod.
Right. Because what I'm getting at here is if people make their picks based on a combination of factors, right? Power level is probably the number one, but castability is fairly high on that list, right? Where all things being equal, people will take a card of a single color over one of multicolors. Like, for example, very similar Alsa's here is Echo Inspector. The next card is actually Celestial Regulator, which is the one blue-white 2/3 flyer. And these cards are somewhat comparable on power level, but I'm not surprised to see Echo Inspector slightly higher on it because it's single color versus two colors.
But it's more expensive.
It is. It is more expensive. But again,
it's definitely a part of that picture. But the general point is that independently of whether they're two-color or monocolor, you basically want to, if you're seeing the cards that are valued by the community, and then you can lose high alpha cards, especially the high alpha commons, because that will happen more frequently that you're going to see them. So they are actually perfect examples for signals.
Interesting.
Rares are not very good signals because you will see the rare once every 15 drafts. So,
right.
If you see a common that is picked quite highly but not super highly, then you will see that quite frequently, and it will be a meaningful signal that you will encounter frequently in your drafting.
Now hold on a minute though. You said rares aren't a good signal because you don't see them often. Can you expand on that a little? Because I'll tell you, pick a good rare, and if I get it 5th pick, I'm taking it as a very strong signal that nobody wants it.
Yeah. You definitely can use them as a signal, but it will not be reliably happening to you. So it's like no point of learning that it's a signal. You just you will improvise when you see it. But there are some cards that it's worth spending a minute and thinking about. Okay, this card is a signal, because not all of them are obvious. Like I gave you the example of this
kill shot.
Kill shot, there you go. I'm terrible card name. Kill shot maybe is not the most obvious signal card, because most people don't, at least most grinders don't evaluate it. Maybe for others it's an obvious signal card, but because in the end it is the average arena user that picks it quite highly. For grinders, maybe less so, because most grinders don't value that card very highly because it has a specific home, and that kind of archetype is not particularly good in this format. So on top of everything. But it's worth to note that it might be a signal, because it might mean that the people on your pod are not particularly interested in drafting white. So
that's interesting. You're totally right. I want to bring up a comparison here using Kill Shot, which has an ALSA of 4.49, but a games in hand win rate, which is our sort of proxy for how good the card is, as a 54.2%, which is, pretty low, right? That's like barely above 50% for 17Lands users.
That's below the average for the 17Lands user, basically.
Right. Where if I go down the list further to find a card, call it similar, card like Skycrier or Gathering Throng, right? Same color. Throng has the same mana cost. These have a lower ALSA. These are right around 5, right?
Higher ALSA.
Fair, but they both have a much higher games in hand win rate. One is 56.7, and the other one's 58.5, but it's much further down on the list. So interestingly, if I used my evaluations, which does have Skycrier and Gathering Throng significantly higher than Killshot, I would miss the signal, right? Like if I saw Killshot, I'm like, well, air quotes, nobody really cares about Killshot because I don't. But I would be wrong in that scenario, right?
This is, I think, this is something that this is exactly what you told, that the scientists are not good in communicating sometimes because they don't take the audience into account. Because they explain like they would explain to themselves, and that's not the point in that. I think that the point is to think about what the other person is thinking and use that. And this is also with reading information and with sending information, sort of work both ways. So in this case, we need to think how the average user is thinking. And average user is valuing the skill shot quite highly.
How can I find that out? As a 17Lands user, can I go on the site? Is there a proxy for, is ELSA a proxy for what other people how other people value it?
ELSA is exactly the proxy for that. And you know what's good about it? If you're crazy enough not to use 17Lands as a user, then you can still go and check that because that's the accessible. I mean, I would obviously suggest you to use it and then deliver more data so my Excel can die in pain by trying to analyze it. But if you don't use it, you are more than welcome to play around with those data and look what's happening. There's going to be some tutorial videos coming up on the 17Lands YouTube, I think.
Okay.
In
this and future. Just to translate that for people that haven't checked out 17Lands yet, if you go to 17lands.com and you go to analytics at the top, there's a drop down, and one of the ones that you can do is card ratings, and it'll provide you with a whole bunch of columns, things like color and rarity, number picked, that kind of thing. But one of those is ELSA. And so you can see that there. And
also, by the way, there are a couple of drop-down menus when you can refine your results. So if you want to look only at the white cards, for example, and one of those that currently says all users, if you scroll down, you can choose bottom, middle, and top. And this is exactly those tiers of players we were talking before. So.
Oh, this is really cool. So like I can sort by ELSA and then I can see what the difference is.
I won't change that much for them because ELSA is based on other users, but other win rates will change, and how often you pick a card, how early you take a card, those things will change.
That is really cool. Oh yeah, I'm playing around with it now. Okay, anyway, I'll stop because I don't want to. I don't want to get distracted. But that's really cool.
But having talked about that and ELSA being important and what will be like a decent signal, I started playing around with what actually how to read them basically. And to do that, I started with one particular very, very specific scenario.
Okay.
I looked at the drafts where 17Lands users saw Inspiring Overseer at pack 1, pick 6 exactly.
Okay.
And then I calculated how many good white cards did they see after that point. So after pack 1, pick 6.
Oh, okay. So the scenario as let me frame that. So the scenario as a use case is I'm drafting and I get what we would all assume would be a very strong signal, right? Which is an Inspiring Overseer, the kind of thing where if you're that person and you're at the shop, you go, why is this still in the pack, right? And frankly, even if you're sitting at home drafting on Arena, you might go, what the heck? Like, have people not read this card? How is this still here? And you wanted to find out, okay, let's take maybe not an extreme example, but that's probably something that doesn't happen very often, right? That card being in there.
Probably right now it happens roughly 7% of the time that Overseer was open 7 spots from you.
And you wanted to say, how often does that actually translate that a signal, if I take it as such, will actually lead to me seeing more white cards later? Wow. What did you find?
And that was, I was absolutely gobsmacked when I did it. So basically I saw very, 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 very small difference. So if you saw that Overseer in pack 1, pick 6, I saw on average 16 above average white cards in the rest of the draft.
16?
I don't look at what happened before. I just ask what happened after the Overseer pick. Mm-hmm. And if I didn't see the Overseer, it was 15.2. So just one card difference.
Wow.
That's not much. And of all white cards, because I think maybe, like you see more all the cards, that difference was even smaller. We saw 29.5 when I saw the Overseer and 28.9. So not even a whole card difference between them.
Okay.
And that made me thinking a lot. And I started looking at different scenarios. I did the same for a card that maybe happens more frequently, a Raffine's Informant. And I also didn't see any difference between those two groups. So also at pack one, pick 6, for both for Raffine's Informant, I also didn't see any difference between the two groups. And that made me think, okay, so maybe it's all about card volume that I see. And then I started running multiple scenarios and testing different windows. Because, for example, I started looking until pick 8. I've seen blah blah cards with alpha lower than X, blah blah blah, and I did like dozens of those scenarios. I'm not going to bore you with all the results, but in the end, I figured out that I'm stupidly including the first 3 picks in my statistics, and first 3 picks don't give very strong signal because the range is small.
Right.
So I excluded those first 3 cards because I can open this very rich booster with white cards. I pick one, pass the rest of them, and that's not a signal. I'm actually the signal station there. So in the end, I came up with the idea. Okay, I started seeing like small signals. I started seeing increase with like the more cards I saw, the more cards I saw later and stuff like that. And in the end, I came up with if I see X white cards, I started with white because I had all the data set already there for the white cards, just for I have for the other colors later. But if I saw X white cards with alpha below 5 between pack 1, pick 4 and pack 1, pick 8, how likely am I to see other white cards in the rest of the draft? And there, finally, I got the result where basically if I saw 0 white cards with this alpha under 5 in my between pick 4 and pick 8, I saw 7 of those cards for the rest of the draft after the pick 8.
Okay.
If I saw only 1 of those alpha under 5 cards between pick 4 and pick 8, I saw 9 cards from the same category in the rest of the draft. Then 10.5 if I saw 2 of them in this window that I decided to find, and 12.3 if I saw 3 of them.
Wow.
And you have to keep in mind that this is only the difference before, but you have to also add that if I saw 3 of those alpha under 5 cards in my window, I also have 3 of those cards from there. Right. So if I pick them there, the difference between seeing 0 and seeing 3 would be 7 cards when I saw 0 and 15.3 when I saw 3. Because so you basically double your output of white cards of the cards with alpha under 5. Okay. Now, unfortunately, this will include kill shots. So there are some bad news there.
You have to filter. So this is interesting because let me see if this lines up with the way that I'm perceiving this. So first off, the big picture thing is that any one individual signal doesn't necessarily mean a whole lot. We're putting a bigger emphasis on the color being open and therefore us receiving multiple data points that supports that. And then the other thing is that this is something that we've actually said on the show for a long time, which is that to view each signal as its own individual data point, but not to view any one card as an open door, open door signal.
Yes. The one thing is that it's also how frequently will you see those signals is important, because of course if something happens like once every 1,000 times, it's not very interesting because you don't play that many games normally to see that.
Right.
So in this case, when I told you that you can see 0, 1, 2, or 3 cards from that category that I told you, you will see 0, 60. Well, 2/3 of the time you will see 0 of them, but 25% of the time you'll see 1. And 7% of the time you will see 2, and only 1% of the time you will see 3. Okay. So every 100 drafts you will see this very particularly open white, and you should react to it, but you should know how to spot it. But 7% of the time, that's something you can think, because you have to think that the same kind of frequency of those signals will be for every color. Mm-hmm. So it will happen much more frequently. It will happen that you will see 2 strong signals for a particular color, every 4th draft or something, maybe 5th. draft. So that's something that you have to keep in mind while you're drafting. And
do you have a sense for why it happens?
Well, it's just that. Why do you see the signals?
Yeah, like an example would be, let's take our Crack-A-Pack that we had here, right? The one that we did earlier. There were 3 cards that were concentrated, around the Broker's color trio that were excellent. A white green, and then a blue, white, green. And, this is a pack where you could easily construct a scenario where somebody gets even like a 4th pick Falco Spara or something like that, right? Like you decide to be super disciplined and you take the Overseer. The next person has a green card and goes, sweet, there's a cool alchemy rare, I'll take it. The next person's in Maestros and goes, well, this is weird, but I'm not going to take, Falco Spara, I'm going to take the Mangler or whatever it was. And then somehow that person sitting there looks at their pack and they've got this bomb mythic rare in the best possible family staring them down, right? This is a thing that could absolutely happen. That was a result of the construction of the pack, right? Is that usually exactly where that comes from? Yeah.
That's exactly why you shouldn't just judge it based on the one card. And that's why the volume is more important, because that one card can be slightly misleading.
I mean, in this case, it's a disaster. Like if they go, let's say that they've taken some Riveteers cards or whatever, and they're like, all right, screw it. Brokers is open. I'm slamming Falco Spara. They literally have 2 of the 3 players to their right that are in colors that are in Brokers or are fully in Brokers potentially. Right? Like this could be really bad for them somehow, even though, I think most players would interpret that the Brokers is actually wide open, even though that clearly wouldn't be the case here.
I mean, it would be a reasonable assumption, don't you think?
Definitely.
But I mean, that's why I always, when I see this thing, I try to assess it from the negative perspective than from the positive. I'm not like, open.
Right.
I mean, yes,
but it backs up
your color combination, then also, because my problem with that is that if I see Falco Spara open in that late, I can only imagine Broker cards that would be picked over it.
Yes, exactly. Especially in this set where you can use deductive reasoning to go, wait a minute, you opened up a pack and you didn't take Falco Spara, you took something else. Okay, and most of the cards that you can justify this with are also in the Broker's color. So that makes sense.
Overseer, that's one. Disciplined Duelist, possibly.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Right. And it's interesting, though, because I think the real takeaway here, because I'm kind of in the nitty gritty, though, is this absolutely backs up what you found from running the tests that you ran, which is that a single data point doesn't guarantee or even necessarily mean that you're going to get multiple picks out of a color, or in this case, a trio later down the road. You would want to see 2 or 3 or whatever the right number is of cards coming around before you actually feel that, yes, this is definitely open.
Yeah, but the nice part of it is that the earlier you wreck, the bigger reward you get. That's why when you pick the right lane from the beginning, it's easy, smooth sailing if the color is open. But it's good to be reactive when you start seeing, especially those signal cards that are not only signals like the kill shot, but also cards that would be interesting for you to pick. Like, pick 3 Inspiring Overseer. Maybe it's not a strong signal, but not pick it because the card is just too good and you can always splash it.
It's interesting. Yeah. The takeaways for me here are, there's a few of them. The biggest ones are what we just said about, not relying on a single data point. Again, we have been saying that on the show for years now, so that's a good validation of that. I learned that from having covered draft at professional level events where I got to see all the packs and all the things going around. Mm-hmm.
There's 2 very important caveats of the data. The data is just like, if I would do any kind of talk on data, it's just caveat after caveat.
Yeah.
First, this data has been taken from the beginning of the format, which might make it a bit different right now when the format stabilized, because maybe in the beginning people didn't know that Inspiring Overseer was good, and some didn't because this was taken higher. And also, those ALSA numbers, if you try to apply them to the professionals playing on the Pro Tour, it would be completely useless because they have different pick orders than the average arena user. So you have to keep that in mind. They are not the signals on the draft with the if a kill shot goes late in the draft with PVVD and Sound Black and Kyle Rose, probably not because the white is open.
That's right. And that was actually, though, the other big takeaway that I would take from this is that this requires you to have knowledge not only about the stuff that we talk about here on the podcast, that you talk about on your seminars, right? Where we're talking about, limited junkies, right? People like us who draft 100 times and who are super into this stuff. This is really valuable information to understand which cards are good, which ones are not, which strategies are good, which ones are going to go for. But if you want to understand signals, you have to understand the broad player base just as much as you have to understand the sort of, it's almost reverse of how you would normally approach it, right? Like I think here, you come listen to a podcast like this, you go to 17Lands, you go to your stuff, your stream and stuff, because you want to get information that other people don't have, right? You want to get the inside track on it's week 1 and we're going draft brokers. That's where you want to be, right? Week 2, it's like, hey, Maestros looks like it's coming out to be a thing. That's where you want to be. Here's how you draft the deck, right? And when you sit down against other players, you're leveraging that information disparity to your advantage. The weird part about this is that you actually need to understand how those other players approach the format, even if you disagree with it, in order to really take advantage of signals.
Oh, yeah, definitely. But it's not as complicated as you might paint it, because in the end, when you go to those tables, we may be talking about, in terms of commons, maybe like 7-8 cards per the whole set, which is fine. Memorize those 7 cards and sort of like keep it as a rule of thumb. Okay, these are decent signals at the common level. If you want to get a bit deeper into it, just look at the uncommons as well. And there's going to be probably double or triple the number of those. And then you're more or less set.
Would the 7 or 8 cards, are you talking about ones that rate on ALSA higher than 5? Okay, higher than 5. Okay, that's a good rule of thumb. Yeah, I was looking for the disparity between game in hand win rate and ALSA. You know what I mean? Yeah. But whatever. I think that your shortcut is a lot cleaner.
Yeah. I mean, it's it must be around 15 cards under ALSA 5, and most of them are good. I think Strangle was not so good, but it's because the color was bad. Killshot is a particular outlier. Body Dropper, again, because of the color disparity.
Yeah.
A Prize Fight, because it's a removal. Very often, like your shorthand in playing Arena would be Arena players love removal because they have bread ingrained in their brains.
Right.
And because of them sticking to the bread strategy, they will pick removal higher than it should be, and not the good removal, the medium removal.
Exactly.
We picked much more higher than the merits.
The highest one of the biggest disparity of the cards that have an ALSA under 5 is Exhibition Magician, which comes in at a pretty paltry 52.9% win rate, which again, adjusted for 17Lands users is 50% or below.
I still love him.
Yeah, don't ever let go. But that card has an ALSA of 4.75. So that's another one that you may not view as a signal, but might be a bigger signal than you actually think it is. Really interesting. That is cool.
Yeah,
any other closing thoughts on the signals thing before we wrap up the show?
So generally, signals can be hard because it's very difficult to disentangle your opinion of the card with the community opinion. And and this thing, it's like before elections, people think that their guy will win, even though polling might suggest something else. And it's hard to let go because you have a very personal feeling for the guy, your guy.
Yeah.
And probably disdain to the rest of the community that doesn't particularly like him. So in this case, it must be the same. So you just look what the community evaluates and know that probably you're right when you pick some card because you look already at 17Lands data, so you know that the card is good. But you don't forget that you're playing it against other people that have their plans, have their preferences, and look at least at those preferences. Second part, signals will be misleading. And still, even if you do your homework, what I'm talking here is the average increase. the average increase means that some drafts, they will be wide ripped open, and some games you will not see any benefit of reading the signals correctly because that's how packs were opened, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, obviously I try to do more scenarios to find the optimum. And one thing I didn't do, which I regret now, is to look at how openness of white is being transferred to openness of the multicolor cards containing white, and that's something
that could be interesting.
Because I only looked at white cards, but maybe there is a bigger bonus there that will be included with those multicolor cards, and especially 3 colors cards, because you should draft 3 colors, and that's your takeaway for today.
There you go. 3 colors for life, says Sierkovitz. I think the takeaway that I would put forth as well is that there's a conceptual way to interact with signals, and this is, again, something that we've talked about on the show for years about using them as single data points. And what Sierkovitz brought to the table here backed this idea up, which is that I view signals, both what I take in from them and how I act on them, as course corrections, small course corrections over time, not stop everything, ditch every card that you've done and go in a completely different direction based off of one signal. That's almost never correct. Sometimes you get lucky and it just happened to be that was the case. But what I'll do is I'll say, okay, this card's still in the pack. It's not a screaming signal, but it does catch my eye, right? This is a Jewel Thief. It's pick 6, pick 7. And I'm going, okay, that card usually goes earlier, right? Single color, it fits into multiple decks. Every deck wants it, So that's a card that might make me go, okay, I'll take it here. But that doesn't mean that I'm ditching whatever I had before. I'm going to now stay open to the fact that color or something associated with that might be open. And I'll see the next pack. And if it keeps coming that way, and I get to see 2 or 3 things that kind of go, this is a little late for a prize fight to be in the pack. It's pick 12. Like I'll pick it up here, and I actually will consider ditching my other 3rd color for this 3rd color, or my other 2nd color for this color. And I view it as course corrections that you keep nudging you in directions where you're making a lot of hedges, right? A hedge is where you're like, I could just take this very straightforward pack for my pick for my deck that's not, that's medium power level. But there's a Jewel Thief, which is high power level, but not necessarily in a color I thought I was going down. I'll take the Jewel Thief. I'm not giving up much to give up on it. And we'll see, just in case this signal becomes more signals and then, green ends up being the place that I want to be. But I think that, from a takeaway standpoint, the key is that you don't ever look at one single signal that you believe is a signal for whatever reason, whether you're correct or not, and that you completely ditch exactly what you're doing to do it. It's okay to take a card in that scenario and go, I am now open-minded to the idea that if this is as open as it seems like it might be, I may go down that road. But I'm also open to the idea that I took a card. It has a very high upside. I gave up something that wasn't super important for my deck to do it, and I'm perfectly willing to just kiss it goodbye and leave it in the sideboard if that route doesn't open up, right? That's the key, because to me, what I keep coming back to from what Sierkovitz found from his research here is it's a preponderance of signals that teaches you what's open, not a single one. So there you go. Hopefully those are some good takeaways to take away from this episode. Sierkovitz, thanks so much for coming on as well, filling in for Luis. You did a fantastic job as always, and I always look forward to your episode for each set. I always feel like I learn a lot, and you bring such a cool perspective to the table. So again, thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. And where can people find you?
Well, thank you very much for those kind words. I still have to wait for the Luis Scott-Vargas evaluation and a continuation of my hiring by him for some weird reason. People can find me on mainly Twitter at Sierkovitz, but I also have Twitch where I don't stream regularly. I just tend to, maybe when the winter comes and the nights become a bit darker, I will start also streaming gameplay, but I mainly do my weekly seminars. Which, by the way, I don't know when you release this episode, but on Sunday I'm doing one when I'm going to look at best of 3 data, because I rarely dive into best of 3, but I will try to look at sideboard cards and things like that. Like
this episode will be up today, which is a Friday, so people will have a day and a half to prepare.
They have time before Sunday. Yeah, so Sunday I should stream a new one, and if you don't, then I put them on YouTube, which is also Sierkovitz. Also, obviously, a big shout out to 17Lands.com, which provide me with all the data, help, guidance. We have a very fruitful collaboration where I eat all the fruit and they do all the growing. And also, can I give a shout out to my LGS?
Of course.
Yeah, I also want to give a shout out to my LGS Stan Games in Falmouth. Stan's Games is a very small LGS, but it's very essential for our small community of Magic players. And probably after that, I might squeak out to have a pint with the guys after they finish their draft, so I can see their decks and complain about how late they picked certain cards.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, and as I mentioned, if you look in the show notes for this episode, you'll find links for the 2 seminars that we mentioned earlier, as well as Twitter, Twitch, YouTube for Sierkovitz, and then 17lands.com as well. So I'll have all those in the notes if you want to look it up. That's going to do it for this episode of the show. I want to thank our sponsors, channelfireball.com and FTX. Thank you so much for your continued support of the show. If you want to find us on social media, I'm Marshall_LR, and Sierkovitz is Sierkovitz. Again, link will be in the description for that. You can find everything related to the podcast at lrcast.com. That has all the old episodes of the show, as well as links to all of our stuff right on the front page. And with that, I'll see you next week. Sirko, we have to come up with a sign off. I totally forgot. This is like Luis's territory. Okay, how about this? What's your favorite food?
Oh, you know that I'm a very, very proficient cook.
You are?
Yeah.
What's the best thing that you can make? Like if I came to visit you in Cornwall and I said, Sierkovitz, I'm so hungry and I just need whatever it is that you can make the absolute peak best version of, what would it be?
Okay, you know what I'm going to give you? I'm going to give you something that's maybe not my best thing, because the thing is dependent on the ingredients. So if you can find the right ingredients, you're going to be golden. But I think something that would be good for this exact period of the year.
Okay.
And that's relatively unknown outside of Spain. And I think it's a criminal offense that it's relatively unknown. And it's called salmorejo.
Okay.
And salmorejo is a sort of Andalusian version of gazpacho. Andalusia is the southernmost region of Spain.
Uh-huh.
And probably someone from Almeria will now kill me because blah, 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 whatever.
Yeah.
But it's basically a take on gazpacho when it's thickened with stale bread. So it's sort of like gazpacho is the tomatoes cold soup.
Yes.
Panzanella is the Toscan salad with stale bread, but it's like in a salad form.
Yep.
And salmorejo is the very much gazpacho version of panzanella. So you put stale bread into this kind of tomato soup, and it's absolutely trivial. So what I do is I take a kilo of tomatoes, peel them by boiling them and peeling the skin off. 1 green pepper, clove of garlic, vegetables you can put 2. Then loads of olive oil, salt and pepper, of course, and stale bread, like good quality stale bread. And I put it in the blender and I blend it, but like almost to the creamy consistency of the mayonnaise or something. Then I chill it for overnight, and for the next day for lunch I have it. And the base recipe is vegan, but traditionally they serve it with the hard-boiled egg cut in quarters, put on top of it. What I like to do is I dice cucumber in those like literally millimeter-sized cubes that they will melt in your mouth. And I freeze them, and I sprinkle this kind of frozen cucumber on top. And they also put jamon serrano, preferably good quality jamon serrano, on top of that, so you can just drink it and enjoy it nice on the grass. It's absolutely stunning and very underappreciated.
And this is served cold, right? It's like a kind of a refreshing lunch rather than something. It should
be overnight in the fridge when it's. But I'm pretty sure you can find good recipes of that online. I don't think I forgot any important ingredient.
You'll find out.
Yeah, a dash of vinegar doesn't hurt.
Sounds great.